Week 4 of the Denver Broncos NFL season is here, and obviously there's a lot to talk about following a 70-20 drubbing at the hands of the Miami Dolphins. How does Sunday's Week 3 loss impact the trajectory of the Broncos season? Plus, did Sean Payton's comments from the offseason come back to haunt him? You'll get all that and much more in this morning's brand new episode, Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos Country. Welcome into another episode of G&B, your daily Denver Broncos bite-sized cup of coffee and Broncos conversation to help you get through your week here at Mile High Sports. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for MHS. Make sure you do us a favor, hit that subscribe button here on our YouTube page. We have some Broncos coverage all throughout the entire season into the offseason. We've got the Nuggets season coming up. Ryan Blackburn, our Nuggets beat reporter, has you covered with the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. Plus, the Avs season is also starting, so Arif Dean has you covered with the Dean's List and the Rocky Mountain High podcast here on Mile High Sports. Every team, every day. Joining me here today, you all know it, hey, on Tuesdays, we go through our mailbag. So I'm bringing on a good friend of the program. His name is Aniello Piro. He's a degenerate sports bettor just like me. But the other things that we're going to talk about here is we're going to go through, it's like a little therapy session here to set the stage for Week 4. Broncos fans sent in their mailbag questions following the 70-20 loss on Sunday. AP, my man, tell you what, Sunday was a very, very interesting day. I know your Cowboys lost, and, the Broncos, obviously, the major talking point in the national media right now because of their drubbing, but not a great football weekend, my friend.
Nah. It was a bad football weekend. CSU won, Air Force won, so it wasn't a completely lost cause. But the Broncos stunk. My personal team stunk in the NFL. The Buffs stunk. And I want to just go back real quick to what you said. Like, the Nuggets are about to start up, the Avalanche are about to start up, and on our YouTube channel, Ryan Blackburn had a sit-down interview with Denver Nuggets rookie Jalen Pickett. So I think as much as, you want to bask in the misery with Cody and I, absolutely. But, there's brighter pastures ahead with some of our other content. I know Arif Dean's working on some stuff for some interviews with the Avalanche. But that was comedy yesterday, Cody, and I don't really know what else to say. I was talking about it with some friends after the game. I don't think I've ever seen a team in the NFL get beat like I saw the Denver Broncos get beat yesterday. 70 points. I've seen teams lose by 45, 48, 50, 55, but 70, I don't know what to do. Yeah. We'll talk about it. We'll answer the questions, but you were always pretty optimistic. I felt pretty optimistic about this season, and now, there is no optimism left in regards to what the ceiling is with this team. Unfortunately, it feels like you have to turn the page and look to, building this team for the future already 3 games into the year.
Look, there's 14 games left in the season, and while Denver is not statistically or realistically out of it, I don't think that right after Sunday's game, Broncos fans aren't buying into any hope or any optimism, right? And can you blame them? And that's one thing I grappled with as well, because folks that listen to me, folks that watch this show, they know that, hey, for me, I look at it from a team-building perspective. I like to look at maybe where this team is at, what they're doing well, and what they can obviously correct to obviously be a better football team. And nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw this coming the way that we saw it. I think everybody expected Miami to win this game, right? But I don't think we expected to see Miami put up 70 points. And to be honest with you, Miami let their foot off the brake a little bit in that game. So it's created a lot of questions. And look, a lot of Broncos fans, I've gotten dozens of emails. I've gotten texts from some fans that have my number. I don't know how some of them got my number, but some got my number somehow. Twitter and even YouTube, fans are just dejected right now. And look, it's tough. And I certainly don't blame Broncos Country. I think what we saw on Sunday, it was embarrassing. We have not seen that in the modern era. The 736 points, yards allowed overall by Denver's defense, that's the most here in the modern era since 1951. You look at 70 points, the most allowed in the modern era since 1951. 10.2 yards per play, the most yards per attempt through the air and passing allowed. That was their average the entire game. That right there is crazy to think about here. But I think also what's more important, Tua was near perfect. 23 of 26. His first incompletion came in the third quarter. They were already up. They were steamrolling Denver. And then they allowed 350 rush yards on the ground between 3 different backs. It was ugly. It was embarrassing. And it's one that I think, I think the term that I used here, obviously Bree's in studio. She might know something about this. Talked about burning some sage, right? Burn some sage, burn the tape, because here's the thing. We talked to Broncos head coach Sean Payton on Monday morning following the game on a conference call, and he said this is the type of situation when you get your butt whooped like that, you're going to learn so much about your team based on how they respond. And I think that this is such a crucial week here for Denver AP. Denver is going to have to find a way to respond from this. What type of response you going to get from the defense that allowed 70 points? It just seemingly, it looked like they quit on some, at one point of the game there. Unacceptable here, and that kind of leads us into our first mailbag question. It comes in from Kinley. He says, what kind of change can you see coming to the defense? Should we start looking to trade some of our key players now here? Now, I'm going to ask you this question here to kind of start it off. We'll answer the first part of his question in a minute, but he asked, should you start looking to trade some of your key players now? Where do you come on board with this? Like, do you think that Denver at this point where they're at, should they rebuild? And obviously rebuilding does include getting rid of some players, but it's like, I don't know if that's the answer right now with the window that you have here with Sean Payton.
It's almost an impossible question to answer because, like, I almost think you have to take Sean Payton out of that equation. And I know that it's only 3 games into the season, but I'm sitting here and I opened up my Twitter. It was either this morning or last night, and I'm seeing the clip from, 4 or 5 years ago now of Emmanuel Sanders, the World of Suck quote, right? That kind of took Broncos Country by storm. And when I saw that again, it made me think, like, this is the exact same story, just being written over and over and over and over, and nothing has changed. And look, it's only 3 games, whatever it might be, but they're already an old roster. You know, Russell Wilson, even though he has looked better, obviously not good enough. This defense is an absolute shambles despite being pretty good the last few years. I'm almost at the point, Cody, I don't know what else you can do. I don't know what other option there is other than scorched earth to an extent. And I know you've got some really good young players, but you've tried and tried and tried and tried that it just feels like the only way to really get this franchise's head back on straight. You talk about the new ownership group, right? You're still only about a season and a quarter into that. Like, maybe it really is a complete reset. And obviously, Sean Payton, if he's up for a rebuild, good enough mind, a trustable enough mind that you move forward with something like that. Exactly. So I'm sitting here and I don't know what the path forward is with this team. And when you trade 3 first-round picks to bring in Russell Wilson, sometimes you got to just take the L. And I mean, I just think with the team right now, you know who the one person on this team that I think you keep at all costs? It's probably like Marvin Mims because he's a rookie. Yeah. Like, I'm serious. Like, right now, I think everybody else, that includes Pat Surtain, Justin Simmons, your big boys. They're great players. But what are you? You're just wasting their. You're wasting their prime. You're wasting their core. Rip the Band-Aid off and look towards another day if that's what you want to do. I just don't see a path forward with this core right now, Cody. They've been trying for 5-6 years. You tell me. Tell me.
You know, I think the biggest thing, and look, to a point, like, if you're going to tear it down, if you're going to rebuild, you're going to obviously have to offset some guys. You know me. Huge Justin Simmons guy for what he does on the field, what he does in the community here for Denver. I mean, he is a face of the franchise player. Right. Pat Surtain, a face of the franchise player. He's on our cover here at Mile High Sports. I still think with a guy like Surtain, you need a building block like him on defense. I feel like he'd be untouchable if you were doing a rebuild, in my opinion, if it were up to me. Marvin Mims, I'm glad that you mentioned him. Javonte Williams would be another guy, in my opinion, because you need to have a running back. And I get it. There's a narrative, don't pay running backs.
Right.
Javonte's been a very integral part of what they're able to do. And look, we're seeing some major injuries right now around the NFL at the running back position in particular here. But, like, if Denver, let's say hypothetically, they were looking at a situation where they were going to rebuild and maybe move on from a guy, I would at least hope, like, I think Justin Simmons, I would love for him to finish his career in Denver. But if you're going to ever do anything like that, send Justin Simmons to a contender where he has a chance to go win a Super Bowl. Man, and that guy deserves it. That guy's put so much work. He's busted his ass, AP, for this franchise since he came in as a third-round rookie draft pick. Really, the year after the no-fly zone really was where it's at. He had an impact right away as a rookie. He's been here. He's always been the face of the franchise for them defensively. Like, if you're going to rebuild, at least do right by him, in my opinion. I just don't want to see him sent to a terrible team if that's the case. And, obviously Denver gets good capital for it. I just send him, do right by him if you're going to do that.
Well, I think that's, for me, the essence of the point, though, is it's not that Pat Surtain, Justin Simmons, insert defensive player, Singleton, even Garrett Bowles, the quote from him about, it sucks. I've been here for 7 years and all we've done is lost. It's not about, hey, like, these guys aren't good, get them out. It's, you have these players that are solid, that could be valuable elsewhere. And obviously, it's a business. You don't just do right by your players. Like, you got to get the value back. But I'm sitting here and I'm saying, hey, Justin Simmons, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, guys in your prime in the middle of your career, all you've done is lose here. if there's an opportunity to, recoup some value and help make this team better, but also these are players that could be valuable to contending teams. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. You don't just ship them off or whatever. Obviously, you got to think about the value that you're getting in return. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make, Cody, is how many more times are you going to try to put a Band-Aid over an open wound? Because Pat Surtain is fantastic. It's meant nothing. Justin Simmons has been fantastic. It hasn't amounted to wins.
Do you know what a difference has been, in my opinion? I think you have an elite corner like Pat Surtain. Denver hasn't had a guy like Von Miller. They haven't had a guy to be able to get after the quarterback, at a consistent rate. Like, they haven't had a real, legitimate star edge rusher since Von Miller.
Yeah. And
that you need that. Like, in my opinion, if you're building a defense in today's era, you have to have a legitimate pass rusher or defensive lineman that can just absolutely wreak havoc. You got to have either an Aaron Donald or you got to have a Von Miller. Those guys are hard to come by, and you have to have a good cover guy. And look, Denver's got two of the best cover guys in football at their positions at safety and at corner, but it's tough. I agree with you. You can't just put a Band-Aid on it. But
they've tried.
But I think that here's where the Broncos are at. You rebuild this, and I think Broncos fans have to hear this. Like, if you want an entire rebuild, Broncos Country, you have to accept the fact that, hey, for maybe 3 to 5 years, potentially even longer, this team isn't going to be very good during that rebuild period. Now, do you want that to happen, right? Because obviously the frustration is they're not good right now. Just where's the balance here? I understand, you're going to have to deal with how bad they're going to be if they rebuild it. But you got to be smart with it. You can't just be reckless when doing a rebuild, though.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the way that I look at it is the Broncos have gone down the, grocery store aisle and they've tried every size Band-Aid, right? It's new quarterback, throw that Band-Aid on, doesn't work. Oh, new running back. Oh, new coordinators. Oh, this, that. Nothing has worked. At some point, you got to just lean into it and have the surgery. And I think, the team that I look at, and I also want to say this, I think a lot of Broncos Country's frustration, I think it's easier to accept losing when there's a vision. And I think right now there is a little bit of a lack of vision, or the vision in which they were looking at, which was this Sean Payton reviving Russell Wilson dynamic, is just not going to come to fruition. And at that point...
Not if the defense is giving up the points that they're giving
exactly,
up.
And that's a whole other conversation. But I look at a team like Detroit, right? They got the opening night win against Kansas City, build some momentum, but I mean, it took Dan Campbell, 2-3 years to get this team, up to speed in regards to looking like a team that could really do something in the league. I think the Bronco fan would rather lean into that, get some talent, build from within. And the other point that I wanted to make too is you bring up pass rush, right? You bring up Von Miller, you bring up Aaron Donald. I think this also applies to the offensive line. That is something that you draft and you develop. How many stud defensive players go sign in free agency elsewhere and are playing at that same level? Vaughn a little bit when he was traded to the Rams. DeMarcus Ware when he came here, right? But you look at that and you look at offensive linemen as well.
I think the only guy I can think of is Hassan Reddick.
Right? That's where the Broncos are lacking is they went into this offseason and said, let me get this offensive lineman and this offensive lineman, and we'll bring in Randy Gregory an offseason ago. Not that they're bad players, but they're over the hill a little bit. And the Broncos have had a problem of drafting and developing core guys at these key positions. They've got Surtain, they've got some players at wide receiver, but they need to draft and develop in the trenches, and they need to draft and develop a pass rush. That's another dynamic I'm picking up on.
Well, and look, and to your point, I mean, I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing at all. I think also another issue with that, why Denver hasn't done that, is because, as you've seen, the revolving door of position coaches, head coaches, coordinators that have gone through this building in Dove Valley for the last 7 years, you can't have that happen. So I think if Denver's going to commit, they're going to say, you know what, this is who we have, this is what we're going to battle with, and you're going to have to just live with it for a little bit. You're going to have to, but Denver's in a position right now. I mean, everyone's calling this week's game against the Chicago Bears the Caleb Williams Bowl.
It just might be.
It might be here. Look, Denver loses this game. Obviously, New York is struggling in a big, big way right now, and obviously Jets fans are coming around and seeing what's going on with Nathaniel Hackett in that offense there. Obviously, losing Aaron Rodgers is big for them, but then they play the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. Then they come back and they play the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love. Then they go back and they host the Kansas City Chiefs. Then they have the bye. Then they're on the road to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, to be honest with you, AP, if Denver loses this game against Chicago, Denver may not win a game this season unless Houston. But even then, Houston's playing good football right now here early on. Yeah. So it's tough to see. And I never like getting so far ahead, but with the way that Denver's playing right now, and really, to be honest with you, it has nothing to do with their offense. Their offense has been drastically better, but the defense has taken such a massive step back. 70 points last week. They surrendered 35 total to the Commanders that got blown out by the Bills. I think it was 37-0 in that game there. And Sam Howell in that game threw 4 picks. So Denver's in a rough spot right now, and I think we've definitely spent a lot of time on this topic here that Kinley said, but I mean, I think it's worth diving into. It's worth deep diving here. But then it kind of opens things up here as well, right? Because we talk about, okay, hey, Denver brought in Sean Payton for this reason. Our next question comes in from Jesse K, and he asked a question here. Do you feel like Sean Payton's comments in the offseason kind of served a little bit as karma this past Sunday here? And what we mean by that is obviously when Sean Payton came in, first off as the head coach for the Broncos, the one thing he said in his press conference, and this was right before the Super Bowl, he had told us that players and the way that they're going to do things as a team, they're going to be like anonymous donors. Nobody's going to know, nobody's going to hear, no one's going to see what they're talking about, what they're doing. But then you have the USA Today article that's done by Jarrett Bell, a fantastic piece there. And look, Sean Payton was not wrong in what he said. It's just wrong that it got out and it created a crap storm, so to speak here. There was those comments there about how last year's coaching job was the worst that he's ever seen. And granted, yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. I mean, I'm not saying that Sean Payton is dishonest. No, he was spot on with that. It was bad. But this is also bad, what we're seeing here. He hired Vance Jospeh. And I think we got to put some context out there as well. A lot of people are saying, well, how come he fired Ejiro Evero? He didn't fire Ejiro Evero. He wanted Evero to stay on. Evero did not want to stay because of what happened with Nathaniel Hackett last season, the way that the Broncos treated him. They're obviously very close. He did not like that. They're part of the QE collective, which they fired off some tweets after Sunday's game there. And then obviously he mentioned, too, before he even signed with Denver as the head coach, it was reported by Adam Schefter that anywhere Sean Payton is going to end up as a head coach, he wants Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator. And I think the dynamic between Vic already being there in Denver, that was a little tough for him. So he went to Miami, and obviously it's paying off dividends for him. But those comments, though, like when you look back and saying, we don't want to talk, we don't want to say anything, we don't want to put out bulletin board material, but yet he's done that. Now Denver's at 0-3, coming off the worst loss in franchise history. Do you feel like maybe some of his comments have come back to bite him in the tail here?
Absolutely. I think, he was very strong. He even tripped at our very own Eric Goodman, on Twitter. Just a little bit of the I can't say this word.
Superiority?
Blah, blah. That word. That is the word that I was looking for. But there was a little bit of that, I'm the man. He's used to having experience and success and all that kind of stuff, and now the world has come crashing down around him. And I want to say this. I was a big Sean Payton guy. Like, as a Dallas Cowboy fan, I always wanted him back as, on my team as a head coach and all that kind of stuff. But you know what I kind of came away with a little bit yesterday? I know that there was a lot of people out there that were, the contingency of, hey, Sean Payton was only as successful as he was because of Drew Brees. It wasn't always Sean Payton. It was always, he had Drew Brees by his side. But I came away from that game a little bit like, has the game passed him by a little bit? And I don't want to be too harsh on it. It's only 3 games.
He did take a year off.
But Mike McDaniel ran laps around him from a game plan perspective. And I've seen a lot of this narrative about positionless football. And part of what makes Miami so good is, Tyreek Hill's 5'10". A lot of their receivers are 5'9", 5'10", 5'11". You don't have these tall, big, dynamic wide receivers, and they make it, you bring up Tua's, completion percentage. Miami sets Tua up for success with the way that they play.
Yeah.
And I just came away from that a little bit as Sean Payton's A game was not working, and he was dead to rights at that point. What he's used to doing, what he's used to finding success with, has not worked so far through 3 games. And not that I think the game has completely passed him by and the year off has made an impact, but when you come into it, with your chest pumped out, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and that's the worst head coaching job I've ever seen from Nathaniel Hackett, and being cute on Twitter with media members and a little chippy with media members. You better back it up. You better back it up. And
this is a different market than New Orleans.
It's a big different market. And, there was that interaction with the local media member yesterday, and kind of next question. Like you could already see. And I brought this up with you. I don't know if we did it on the show, but you and I were at the Washington game together. I found it very interesting that when the whole wristband conversation was a thing, he brought up how, we had to call timeouts that I'm not used to calling, essentially hinting at things that he used to be or how things were in New Orleans. And so, look, it's very early in the Sean Payton era. I still trust him to figure it out. Reality is setting in, though. It's not just, I'm the man, let me do me and let me cook. This thing, to our point, is not a Band-Aid. It's a surgery that's required.
Yeah, and look, this is just a tough schedule, and with how things have gone, I want to preface it by saying I've looked at it from the standpoint that Broncos fans don't have a lot of optimism. Look, after Sunday's game, I got a lot of emails, because obviously my email's in my Twitter bio. I got a lot of emails from fans saying that they're not going to attend another game this season. Some of them being season ticket holders. They've already paid for their tickets, which you know how expensive that is, right? So it's like, okay, are you really going to not show up, right? Even after you've invested thousands of dollars into tickets, season tickets, obviously. To me, I think this is going to be huge, right? Because Denver's obviously on the road this week. I am very curious, and I will be very curious to see what Week 5 looks like at Empower Field. How many fans are in attendance versus how many no-show, things like that, because fans want a better product. They want this team to win, right? The expectations for this team have always been high, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, all right, at this point, I think you're in a position as a franchise right now where the optics of this team, it's hard for fans to see hope. It's hard for fans, like obviously in media, we get different access to certain things and we see some things like, and there's things that you and I have both seen from the Broncos that give us like, okay, hey, they're heading in the right direction in these areas, but fans at this point don't want to hear that. They don't. And I don't blame them because the last 7 years have just been abysmal from a win-loss standpoint, the on-field product. It's a tough position to be in right now because even though that in some areas they might be doing some things right, it's piled on. It's a snowball effect of all the stuff that's gone wrong. And once again, you got a lot more going wrong right now for this team than you have going right.
And like I said, man, like I know you're the beat reporter and I've been around the team for the last, 7 years or so. I feel like I'm about as optimistic as it gets without being a cheerleader in the media. Yeah. And like I thought this, like I said, I like Sean Payton. I like liked Russell Wilson. I don't know what is going, and like that's what's so perplexing to me is I don't know what to make of it. Like it's hard for me. Oh, is this? Oh, it's that? Oh, they lack talent. Oh, this opponent. Like what is it? And that's the absolute mystery for me is why can't this team play better? Why can't this team play winning football? Because I think to the point that I made earlier, they have got, like if Justin Simmons was on the trade block right now, if Pat Surtain or Alex Singleton or Garrett Bowles or any of these guys open for business, right, there would be a handful of teams lining up to try to acquire that talent. So why can't they put it all together in Denver? Why have they struggled? And again, I feel like it's too early to completely cast judgment on Sean Payton, but the fact that you're 3 games into Sean Payton era and arguably look worse than you did under Nathaniel Hackett, problem. Yeah, big problem.
It's a big hole, and I don't know if you have a big enough shovel right now that's going to help dig you out of it. And that's the thing is like this 0-3 deficit, it feels like you're like 0-9 from the optic standpoint of it, right? Like that's where the fan base is just so frustrated because think about it. I've never seen... I think Sunday's game, and look, I had people who say, I've been emailed me, messaged me, commented, I've been a Broncos fan since 1960s and, 1965. Like, folks that are way older than me that have been around and have been in the stands for decades and decades and decades. They were like, that was the final straw for me. So it's like, and I get it. And
it's embarrassing.
It is rough, but it's like, the standard for Denver, it was different under Pat Bowlen.
Yes,
and look, it's going to take time, I think, for them to get back there. I know for a fact that the Walton Penner family ownership group, they would not have bought in this team if they didn't have similar aspirations. But they're going to have a hands-on experience here, and they're going to have to deal with a little bit of the mud of how do you turn a franchise back into a winning product. That is a challenge. I mean, to be honest with you, AP, how many teams out there right now in the NFL have been trying to figure that out for years? Like the Cleveland Browns are a great example.
But some of those are just bad organizations. Yeah. And are the Broncos maybe turning into a bad organization? Or let me ask you this. Have they been a bad organization since Pat Bowlen, since the remnants of that have gone out?
I'll say
they have been one of the worst organizations
from
on the field,
on
the field since Super Bowl 50. I mean, I don't have the win-loss in front of me, but I mean, I'd put them up there with
it's bad.
Exactly. The Jets-esque, Bears-esque. Like that is the level of which we're talking about with this organization. And like that, like I want to be able to give the fans and give you something more.
Tough.
I am scratching my head. And I guess here's the one thing that you fall back on. Sean Payton is an experienced guy. He's won a Super Bowl, proven track record of history. You can't cast judgment on an entire era in just 3 games.
Correct.
You knew 100%. Right away that Nathaniel Hackett was not the guy.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the hell is wrong with Sean Payton and this team right now, but I still have seen enough from him in his career that I could be like, okay, he should be able to figure it out. I guess that's the one semblance of optimism. Let him get his quarterback. Let him get his guys and see what they could do. But it might take some time.
Yeah, we'll see what the clock says here for the Denver Broncos, but they will kick off action this Sunday, Soldier Field, against the Chicago Bears, who are struggling in their own right. There's an argument that's being made on national media. These are the 2 worst teams right now in the NFL. Can Denver find a way to get their first win of the season to go to 1-3 versus 0-4 with a tough gauntlet of games to come ahead. Broncos Country, if you ever want to get involved in the mailbag, today was a little bit different because there were some really great topics we had to discuss here on today's episode of GMB. You ever want to get involved, though, you can always email me, Cody@milehighsports.com, or you can interact with me on Twitter, Cody Roark NFL. This is my guy over here, Aniello Piro. You can follow him on Twitter, @media by AP here. But hey, thanks for rocking with us here this morning. Go pour yourself another cup of coffee. Go take a walk. Get a workout in today. Do great things. And we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Good Morning Broncos.